Hey there, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome. I thought I'd try and change the vibe up a little bit with the camera angle and the camera perspective and all that stuff. So, what I want to talk about in this video, this vlog, is the concept of a composer, I guess, in the year 2019. What does it mean? This has been on my mind since I started doing this job, since I started actively seeking out jobs as a composer, working from home, not working with real live players, working basically with MIDI. The joke that I usually make when I tell someone that I'm a composer or I do composing work is they'll ask, do you play, what instruments do you play? And the truth is I can't really play anything like a piano very well or anything like that. I can figure out MIDI. So what I usually say is I can't make anyone cry with a piano. And the truth is I can make people cry with a piano if they actually heard me playing a piano, because it's like get that cat off the piano kind of terrible piano playing. But this question has kind of bubbled to the surface a little bit recently after I made a video on the London Contemporary Orchestra strings textures from Spitfire Audio. I had a comment, very respectful comment, mind you, from someone I consider to be like kind of a long-time listener and also a many-time caller. He's commented before, she's commented before. And I want to frame what I'm going to talk about in the context of that question. And I want to do it justice. So I'm going to read it to you, and I'll put it on the screen too, just so I don't mangle anyone's words or mess anything up. So I could reach for my phone here. I saved it. And this is what they wrote. So SME 2000 or SME 2000 wrote 5 days ago, I think there's a growing danger with these libraries that are slowly removing the composer from the composition. Considering you can pretty much one finger create soundtracks now, there really is zero composition skill involved anymore. I mean, no offense, Geoff, but what is there? 30 notes played in this piece, plus the looping percussion line, question mark. And then I wrote back to him. And this was kind of more of like a philosophical kind of answer more than strictly addressing what he was saying, but I'll read it out. I say, I press a key on a piano and a sound comes out. I press a note on a MIDI keyboard using LCO, London Contemporary Orchestra, and a sound comes out. It's far more complex and arguably more interesting, but the principle is the same. Where I go from there is up to me. I still have to choose the sounds I like, the order in which they appear to form a decent arrangement. I have to automate levels so we don't end up with a goopy mess. I have to mix and balance the tone of the cue until it's something I'm proud of. The conversation didn't stop there. He responded again, or she responded, sorry, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. And then somebody else responded. And before we get, and by the way, it all happened very constructively, which I have to say I'm really proud of. The fact that on the channel and in the chat, we can respect each other's opinions. That really matters a lot to me, that it's a safe space for people to disagree. But before we get into, what someone else said and the kind of thread that it went into, I want to explore this idea of what a composer is nowadays and what their job is. And one thing that comes to mind when I think about this question of, automation or pressing one finger and calling it a day, one thing that comes to mind is the work that I do at iZotope, a company I work for full-time, but I don't talk about much on this channel. But I think I'm going to make an exception today because it relates to this conversation. So at iZotope, we are known as, in as much as we're known as a company that makes, cool software that helps people, that empowers people to be creative and make music, we're also known more so now for having this kind of machine learning assistive tech angle. So this is the idea that we have machine learning algorithms that are informed by neural networks, baked into some of the algorithms that we make for stuff like music rebalance and RX, or some of the assistive tech that we have in Neutron, RX, Ozone, and Nectar. So you just press a button, it listens to the audio and makes some decisions for you to get you started. And then from there, it's up to you to go in and change the EQ, compression, all the rest of it. This is designed purely from a, presets are static, and people start there anyway. They'll start with a preset and then they'll, change things. We thought, what if we create a non-static organic preset that actually, puts some settings in there, but takes into context the uniqueness of the sound that you're coming up with. This was met, I wasn't at the company when Neutron 1 was debuted, which is where we first kind of, pushed this technology out into the open. This was met with a little bit of, arguably a lot of resistance from a lot of people. And now things have normalized to a point where people are kind of used to it. Other companies are introducing assistive technology, so-called smart plugins. But a lot of people worry that this would, maybe not immediately, but down the road, replace the mixing engineer or the mastering engineer. Something a good friend of mine and colleague Jonathan Weiner said was, he drives. I famously, maybe not famously, but people that know me know that I don't have a driver's license, so I can't really relate to this metaphor. But he said, when I want to drive around a canyon or something like that, of course I want to do it manually. But when I'm just trying to get to the grocery store or, drive a long distance, of course I want my car to take control. Of course I welcome smart cars and I welcome self-driving cars. But when I want to hug the turns, across some canyon like you'd see in a Buick commercial, yeah, I want to do that driving. That's the fun stuff. Thinking about that and thinking about that debate, how do we relate it to what's going on now with composers? So where does the smart technology lie in the kind of tools that we use and the kind of tools that this YouTube commenter was pointing us in our environment? I think that, we're seeing more and more stuff like chord generators. We've always had MIDI kind of tools and plugins and things natively in our digital audio workstations that can sequence stuff and arpeggiate stuff and help you kind of fill in the blanks, or maybe take a piece of audio and convert it into MIDI. That's kind of a form of smart technology that assists you in doing something that might take you, if the technology didn't exist, a little bit of time, a little bit of ear training to kind of find the notes, find the root, and then place out the chords. The other kind of way that it's coming in, or has always kind of been there, is with I think of East West's. They've got like legato patches where you just press a note and you get an articulation. And the way that they always position those kind of auto legato, previews was they would say, this is a reference for you. This is a reference for you to listen to how you should be playing this with MIDI. But they always had them there, and they're extremely popular. And when I was at NAMM, I went to their booth, and they just debuted, I think, a new brass library. And they didn't have the MIDI ready, but they did have those kind of auto legato patches that you would just, hold your hands down on the keyboard and get a really cool note or something like that. Not a really cool note, but a cool articulation where it would just kind of go off, and you could hear the potential of the library. Of course, you would have to go in and program something that would be similar to that, but deep down, I think a lot of people did use those auto legato things, and I know that I've used them before and other people do. The other place that this exists is in the kind of phrase libraries from Sonokinetic, a company that I adore, and you've seen me talk about them on this channel. They make what are called phrase libraries, where you have, a couple of kind of loops basically that you can play around with in different keys and chord structures. Very intuitive. You're still deciding, what notes you want to play. And they've got cool stuff like harmonic shift where you can kind of, they've got really, really cool stuff, but still underneath it is a kind of looping thing that helps you get a job done. And now I guess the conversation has moved into the Spitfire territory where instead of a looping phrase or a kind of auto legato thing from East West, you can kind of put your finger down. And when you do that, a kind of flurry of sound will come out and emerge into this really evolving thing where it's dynamic and it's moving around, and it's kind of capricious, and you never know where it's going to go and what it's going to do. I think the argument that some people are making, or getting close to making, is that that's not really composing. You're not really doing that. You're pressing something that is triggering this really interesting kind of confluence of sounds. And I don't know if I have a really educated rebuttal to that. Like, that's true. That is exactly what is happening. But what I said in my comment still holds, I think. This idea that, okay, yes, the note that I get coming from this library as compared to when I play a recorder or a guitar string or something, it's still a note. And when I play that note in LCO or something else that Spitfire have in the Evo category, I'm still choosing to play that note, but the sound that comes out, while it's still a C, it's a very complicated, beautiful, complex C that just kind of has a life of its own. Is that C, do you guys think, still a C? Are you still playing it? Are we still doing what we're doing? I guess is the question. And there's the other side of it, which is, if you happen to create something, compose something, does the client, and maybe it's just you, maybe you're just doing this for fun and you're just playing around, but if the client is happy with the results, do they need to know that you came about those results in a way that might differ from what their expectation of you as a composer is? So are we lying to our clients, or would the clients care either way if they're just satisfied with the result. If you can't see what's coming out of the kitchen, but you think the meal is delicious, does it matter? Would you lose any respect for the head chef if the head chef told you that a bunch of ingredients were assembled and kind of put together by a team of other chefs, and it was that chef's job to basically pick and choose and assemble them and cook them and season them just properly and then bring it out to you? It's hard to find analogies out there in the non-musical world to kind of relate to what we're talking about here. And then there's the other angle of all this, which is I will never have access to an aircraft hangar and 40, 50 incredible players basically playing whatever I want them to play in that moment. I think more and more the demands on composers are they're more and more kind of unrealistic. It's happening across our audio industry. People are being asked to do more with less, fewer resources, less money, and we're being asked to do a lot in terms of, sound-alike stuff. I want to hear this Hans Zimmer thing. I want to hear this John Williams opus. I want to hear that. And you kind of get that note and you're like, well, I'm one person in a studio with a keyboard. I don't have access. Even if I had the money, I don't think I could make a business case to support going out and hiring a bunch of players. So I kind of have to do the best that I can with the tools that I have. And I think the thing that we're all kind of inching towards is that the tools that we have are just getting better and better and smarter and faster and more beautiful, frankly, sounding than the tools that we had maybe 10, 15 years ago. Should we feel guilty for using these incredible tools to express ourselves and realize that the dreams and aspirations of our clients? Should we feel guilty about that? What is the degree to which we go from I made this to I used a thing that made this for me? Because I used LCO textures to create a cue that I think is pretty good, but some might argue that I had very little to do with the sound that I kind of fell in love with and the way that library sounds. It has everything to do with Christian Henson and those guys over there in the air hangar. Some people might say that they had more to do with that cue and the result, the output of that sound than I did. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disappoint you guys, but I don't have answers to this stuff, but I just want to pose the question in an elegant way and find out what you guys all think of this. Because we can go behind these layers of, I didn't do this. At what point can you draw a line and go, I did that? I mean, should we be expected to sample everything ourselves? Should we be expected? I mean, look at loops, for example. That's one thing that's just blowing up right now and going crazy. Loop companies, so like Splice and now Sounds with Native Instruments. And we've also had loop packs from Loop Masters and whoever is using that stuff kind of cheating. I know I'm going in 1,000 different directions here, but I really want to know if there's any kind of psychic friction in your minds as composers when you're thinking about your own work and you're bringing your work to clients and going, here's what I have. Because I think for most of you, you're like me. You compose primarily, well, maybe exclusively with MIDI, and you rely on these sample libraries. Christian Henson, a little while ago, it was one of his earlier videos. He was saying that composing is like coffee, where you have 90% of the coffee and then you have 10% of the cream. And what he was saying was 90% of the coffee was like real world samples. Like you write all your MIDI, you do all your mock-ups, and you present that to like incredible players in a beautiful room with great preamps and cables and outboard gear and all the rest of it. And then 10% of it is samples. I think for most people, we look to these tools not to create the 10% creamer. It is the full cup of coffee. We are using all of Spitfire stuff, or maybe some Spitfire, some orchestral tools for the majority of people out there. And I really mean the majority of people out there. It is all samples, and they sound, getting back to what I said, they sound so good. They just sound so good. And I'm not saying that they sound so good such that you don't have to mix, that you don't have to taper, that you don't have to control and compress and decide what's going to win, what's going to be kind of in the hierarchy of sound. My violins are going to be at the center stage or whatever. That's why they've got the mic mixes and reverb built in and all that stuff. There's still work to be done on our parts, but the sounds are so good because the tools are getting better and better that it makes sense and it's feasible and tenable to create something really beautiful and epic that sounds like Hans, that sounds like Williams, it sounds like, I don't know, Reznor in your DAW, in your space right here. I don't have to go to the symphony orchestra. I don't have to do that. I can do everything here in my room and convince, maybe to some people, dupe my clients that I had access to a beautiful space with incredible players. I don't feel guilty about that. And I think it's becoming increasingly less and less true that us composers are supposed to rely on these tools as mock-up tools. And if you don't know what that is, a mock-up is just like I get a rough draft and then I hand it over to someone else who kind of flips it in Sibelius or something into notes, which then an orchestra can play, and then it's real. I think most of us are doing the best we can with the budgets that we have, and even that's kind of tricky because sample library, I mean, especially with Spitfire and orchestral tools, it's expensive. But that's kind of where it ends. It's not a mock-up and then it goes to an orchestrator and then it goes, through the air and stuff like that. It is purely MIDI. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm way off on that stuff. But I just feel like it's a matter of necessity. This is the best I can do right now. I can't justify a business plan to go and convert all the notes into real stuff that someone who has been playing for 40 years can interpret and then play. So when I get something like LCO, when I get something like an Evo or even Time Capsule from Orchestral Tools, which I really want to make a video on because it's stunning, when I get like an amazing Brunel loop or like the steam band thing, the percussion thing, and I play that, I feel like, okay, cool. I don't have to leave the apartment. This is enough for me. I can make something really beautiful out of this. And I would never have access to that kind of talent in that room and everything. I don't know what the rent is at Air Studios, but I can say with a certain degree of confidence that I cannot afford it. But I think for the people in this channel, I really want to hear from you guys on this. Am I way out to lunch with this stuff? Have the machines taken over and I've just like acquiesced to them unknowingly? And it's just like, what's going on here? I'd love to know. And I think that it behooves us to kind of dig deep and think about the work that we do and the creative side of it and where we feel creative. I feel, if anything, working inside the box, it's such a misnomer. It's such BS in the box. I say that more on a mixing mastering side, allows me to be extremely creative. Like Andy Sheps, an incredible mixing engineer. If you don't know who he is, he does Google Talks and stuff, and I've met him. He's a great guy. He said, and he's someone who's surrounded by outboard gear. If you ever look at his little studio, I think he's in France or something like that, or the UK. He's in the middle of nowhere, but he's surrounded by incredible gear that anyone would be happy to own. But he said, I'm completely in the box now because for me that feels like where I can be most creative. Okay, it's where I feel I can make the most interesting choices to express myself musically in a mix or whatever I happen to be working on. And sometimes it feels like that for me too when I'm using sample libraries. I'm like, I probably would get some really awesome results if I just like bucked up and learned how to score properly with like a pencil and a paper and all that stuff. But I feel with stuff coming out now from Output, from Orchestral Tools, from Spitfire, from East West, even little no-name companies that are jumping up with amazing offerings, I feel like that allows me to be extremely creative and proudly creative. Like I'm the one that came up with that. I'm the one that did that. Even though I'm using tools that somebody else kind of helps source and assemble and distribute, that's still me. But I don't know. Am I fooling myself? Are we all fooling ourselves? Are we all just kind of like press and play, pressing the space bar, hitting one note, getting an amazing sound, and then going to lunch? I'd love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know how this affects you. If there's any kind of, again, psychic friction, if you think about that when you're composing stuff, do you feel like you're duping someone? I was talking to, that was ages ago now, back in my old apartment, a composer who appeared on my channel. And after the camera stopped rolling, we were talking about Sonokinetic, and he's just like, I made this thing with Sonokinetic, and then I felt like it just wasn't me. So I had to delete it. I kind of recreated it on my own. He said he didn't feel like it was intellectually honest to do that. So I'm wondering, do you guys feel like there's an intellectual dishonesty to your work sometimes when you use something that just sounds so good that if you were to do it, you could do it. It might take a little bit of time and you don't have that much time. So you maybe use something like that. Let me know. And thanks for watching. We'll do some end cards here. And hopefully I got the lighting right. It feels a little bleached out, but anyway, take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.